And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Christine McBride, who had a near-death experience due to an infection in 2015 and an out-of-body experience in 2016 that transformed her life. Christine, thanks for joining me and welcome.
Thanks, Jeff, for having me.
Well, Christine, let's start with the experience from 2015 and go from there.
All right. Well, in order for your viewers to understand why I was in the situation I was in, let me just give a little background. I was sprayed with jet fuel when I was in the military, and that set in motion an immune response that resulted in a whole bunch of autoimmune diseases and 2 cancers. And in 2007, I had breast cancer and it was not early detection. And I had bilateral mastectomies with breast reconstruction. And in 2014, I fell, rupturing an implant, and I had to have surgery. But the autoimmune disease by that time and the cancer had done so much damage to my body that the doctor didn't believe that I would survive a surgery. So he sent me home and told me to do yoga. So for a year, I did yoga to build up my strength. Went in 2015. I was still very weak, which was a big problem. And during the first surgery, there was a mistake that was made, and I internally bled and required a second surgery. And after the second surgery, within 2 weeks, I was back in the hospital with a life-threatening infection. And I live in Bakersfield, and I had the prior surgeries down in Los Angeles. So the local hospital did not want to treat me. They suggested I go back down to the original hospital. But after talking to them, they ended up treating me and getting me into an ambulance. And it was in the ambulance on the car ride home when I was finally, like, I could feel my body was shutting down. And I really had to kind of fight with them to get them to ambulance me. And so once in the ambulance, I was finally like, I spoke to my doctor, told him we were coming. I felt like, okay, somebody's got me. I can finally relax. And that was the last thing I remember before the event. And I slipped into unconsciousness. I died on the way down. They had to give me CPR, which broke a number of my ribs, and then another surgery on that same area. So it was really kind of a horrific period of time. And during my near-death experience, I remember being in the tunnel that everybody talks about. And if I can explain it, it feels very much like you are out in space. So it's dark all around you, but there are these kind of, there are these bands of light around, all different colors, lights, and they're moving and it's creating a tunnel. And I was just in shock because for the very first time after having all of these health problems and being in so much pain because I also have rheumatoid arthritis and lupus, and I was in a very painful body, and I was finally free from my body for the first time ever. And I hear Ram Dass talking about describing being out of your body this way, and he says it's like taking off a tight shoe. And I would have to agree that is very much what it feels like. But for me, because I had such problems with inflammation and so much physical pain, it was like being out of stilettos you've been dancing in all night and you can barely walk. I mean, the relief was just 100 times that. And I was thrilled that I was free from all this pain, and I was zipping around that almost like a snowboarder. I was just zipping around the tunnel and just going, whoa, and being so full of joy because I was finally free of it. And realizing that it was more than just I was free from the pain. I was in my, I guess, what you would call the spirit body. And I was feeling unconditional love. And beyond feeling it, I was made of it. Everything around me was made of it. It was the sort of the stuff that holds the whole universe together. And I felt this unconditional love for the first time. And up until that time, I was born into a family. My mom and dad loved us, but they came from a long history of addiction and violence and, you know, abusive situations and trauma. And, when that's so ingrained in your family line, it's like you get sold on the same story that everybody else got sold on, and you've got one story to tell your kids, and it's a trauma. It's a terrible story, but if you don't know a better story and you don't know a better way of being, then that's all you got to give them. And I picked up the same story, and I had no feeling of self worth. My mother had demonstrated that worthlessness and really low opinion of herself, and just this a lot of self hatred and self loathing. And I picked that up, and it just really impacted my life. And up until that point, I really didn't want to be here. I really wanted to be out of this world. And so this was the first moment that I had experienced love for myself. I loved my family, I loved my daughter, but trying to build love for self was a real trick that I had not been able to manage, and it kind of broke me open emotionally. And the amazing thing was there was sound. There was a sound to it as well, and it was coming from the energy of unconditional love. It you could say it. Love had a sound. This is what it would be. Yeah, and I'm so sorry. I've talked about this many times, and it's so emotional for me still. Um, if you can imagine every musical instrument playing one long continuous note, and more than that, everything that could possibly make sound, and everything out there, every vibration that is out there making a sound, and you would think, that sounds so chaotic. That would be horrible. But it wasn't. It was all perfectly and beautifully harmonized. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. And it just went on through the whole experience. It was just one long, continuous note. And I just remember being in that space and basking in that unconditional love. And I don't know how long I was there, but I realized I was in the tunnel alone. There was no one there to greet me, and I wasn't moving. I was just in it. And when I kind of stopped being like so in the moment with that beautiful feeling, I kind of wondered, okay, well, now what? And just then the side of the tunnel opened up. And when I looked through it, it was like I was looking into another world, another realm or something. And it was this, I was overlooking vast, beautiful landscape. And I had a deep connection with it, and such a deep connection with it that in that moment I thought, well, maybe that's my home. Maybe that's, must be. I mean, why would I have that kind of reaction to it? Maybe it's opening up and that's the direction I'm supposed to go. I don't know. But as I was looking out over that gorgeous landscape, I became aware of the fact that it was nighttime. There was no sunlight. There was a full moon, so you could see everything, but no real light other than that, the reflected light. And the trees had no leaves on them, and there was no grass in the meadow or flowers. There were no animals, and there was no water in the river. It was as if it was a template for a beautiful landscape, but no actual life in it. And just as that awareness came into me, and I thought, oh, what is that about? There was a voice within me, not mine, somebody else's, that said, you, oh, I wish I could do this without tearing up so much. That said, you have a beautiful life, beautiful. But up until now, you've done nothing with it. So your work is to go back and do the work to fill up that landscape, to add life, to add richness and love. And that's what I was missing. And it was true, up until that time. I mean, at the time of this in 2015, I was 52 years old. And up until then, I hadn't, my life had been full of loss and terrible tragedy and one unpleasant experience after the next, and illness and disease, and just really going from one terrible experience to the next. I mean, I had beautiful experiences as well, but my life was full of misfortune. And I had just taken a headlong dive into self sabotage because of that chronic feeling of worthlessness and self hatred and self loathing. And I didn't realize how much that impacted my life, how it really did create so many of the experiences that I had up until that point. But in that experience, what that showed me was that was the big problem. The big problem wasn't the world around me. The big problem wasn't my body, falling apart because of the toxic exposure. The big problem was the real devastating effect that my personal belief about myself had, because I was not allowing anything good in. And I was creating my own hell on earth because of that inability and unwillingness. And that's really what it was. I mean, it felt like I was unable, but really I was unwilling to even consider letting anything good into my life, and the devastating consequences it had, not only in my life, but in the lives of everybody I was involved with, including my own daughter. And at that time, she was an adult daughter, grown up, and she had a daughter of her own. And she only had, because I only had that one story to pass down to her, she only had that one story to pass down to her daughter. So it was a story on the move, impacting many, many lives. And when I came back, it was very confusing for a long time. It took me a long time to sort of pull everything out. The recovery was horrific. And because the television was playing in the hospital, my experiences got kind of tied up with what was playing in the hospital room. And it took me a long time to sort of pull out what was the television, what was the actual experience. Because the near death experience did happen while I was coming into the hospital. All of these, it's sort of opened the floodgates for all of these other spiritual experiences happening to me while I was in the hospital. And that continued when I got home. And when I say it broke something open in me, it really did. And what I think it broke open was my heart chakra. Because when I grew up, I was super sensitive to everything. Now somebody would probably say I was on the spectrum of something, but it was like sound and noise and people's emotions, and I just could not seem to keep anything out. I was very overwhelmed by all of it. And the way I learned to deal with it was to harden my heart, was to build this sort of crusty, shut everything down, shut all of that emotion down and disassociate from it. And over the years, I know I held it in my heart because I could feel it in my heart. And I had developed this, it almost felt like a little tiny stone at the center of my heart. There was just this really hard little stone that I could feel. It would hurt, and I'd had it forever, so I didn't know what it was supposed to feel like otherwise. So I didn't know there was a difference until I had had this experience, and I think in a very physical way. I mean, it wasn't just this spiritual experience out of my body. I think when they broke my ribs, giving me CPR, it also, I think that stone I was feeling was also tied up with my fascia, my connective tissue, and there had been almost like scar tissue built up around that area. And I think by traumatizing that area so significantly, it kind of broke all that open. And then having the experience of the emotional release And that unconditional love feeling kind of opened everything up, because after I came home, um, it was such a bizarre feeling. You if you know anything about the chakras, all of the different chakras have different petals on the lotus flowers that represent each chakra. And the heart chakra, I can't remember now offhand how many petals it had, but it felt like something was just that my heart was just expanding and expanding. And it felt like as my heart was expanding, I could feel inside brushing up against the inside of my rib cage. Like it felt like petals of a flower just opening and opening and opening and opening and opening. And it just kept going and going and going. And I felt very much like, that old animation, Grinch That Stole Christmas, and where the Grinch has that moment where his little tiny shriveled up heart grows and it breaks the box open. It really, it had a physical feel to it, very much like that. And I felt like it was just going to burst out of my chest. And and then not long after that, my third eye chakra opened. And it was about a month or two after that. And during that experience, it was almost like somebody had taken an ice cream scoop and scooped out my prefrontal cortex. And it felt like this whole area of my brain was just one giant sinus that was breathing in all this air. It felt like the air was going right directly into my brain. And it was just such a strange experience. And I got deeply into meditation after this, because, when you experience something so profound and being in what they call the bliss body and experiencing that unconditional love, that becomes almost the drug that you chase. Then that's the feeling that you want to come back to again and again. And so I got into meditation as a way of just getting back into that headspace again, almost like you're milking it and trying to get it to grow, and so that you can just sit in that space. And it's took me it was about a year later, and I was doing a lot of meditation. And there was one day I had been meditating on and off, not solid, for about 3 hours. And I got into a space where I was just trying to surrender into this meditation, and surrender physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, in all ways. And it's a lot more difficult to do than you think. Um, and pretty soon I started experiencing something different. And it was almost like my eyes were closed, but it was almost like these light and dark lines started kind of doing this, although my eyes were closed. And as it sped up, there was a vibration with it, and it was like a pulsating vibration, and it started speeding up. And these lines kept moving, and then it became more of a solid energy line that started, and there was sound to it. It got quite loud, and it was so hard. I wanted to come up out of it, and it was difficult to remain completely surrendered to it. But I was able to do it, and in one fell swoop, something happened, and I popped out of my body. And it wasn't like a gradual. I got shot out of my body like a cannon, like getting shot out of a cannon. I didn't go and bump around on the ceiling. I went far, far, far away from Earth. And my little my little spirit body, those cartoons where you see a little cartoon animal shot out of a cannon and their little bodies flopping all over the place. That's kind of what it felt like. I could feel my body just sort of whipping back and forth, all this air coming in. And I got way far out, and the sky was dark. I was way far away from the earth. And all of a sudden, it was like somebody just reached out and grabbed a hold of my ankle, and I came to a stop. And I didn't know why I stopped. And I wanted to continue going. And I, in that moment, decided, excuse me, that it was fear, that it was my own fear keeping me tethered to the earth. And So I did a little visualization in my mind and I said, okay, when this thing that I'm visualizing ends, it will mean that I have let go of my fear and I'll be able to continue on. So I set that intention. Excuse me. All right. And when my visualization was over, it was like the hand just let go. And I then very slowly began to move away from the earth. And I saw some pretty magical things happening. One of the things that I saw was bright bands of light, and they were like vertical bands of light with kind of a tracer behind them. And some of them, and they were everywhere, they were all across the sky. And some of them were brightly colored and translucent, and others were not so bright, more opaque. Some were moving quickly in different directions, others were still and not moving at all. And I understood that that's that's us. You know, that's us coming and going. That's, I guess you could call our spirit or whatever it is you want to call it. And they were everywhere. And as I was going higher and higher, that feeling of unconditional love that I had experienced in the near death experience was all around me. And it was all around me before I left my body. That's one of the things that had happened. I'd come fully into the bliss body, and then it opened up. And so I was in this blissful state. And as I was moving away from the earth, I began moving closer to object up there. And I can't explain it, but it was neon green. And all the colors that I saw were like neon colors. They were very, very bright colors. And it looked to me like a football on point with sort of a green ring around it, like Saturn's ring. The ring, the center thing, football shape was very bright, and there was a lot of energy coming off of it. And the rings were the same color, but they were more translucent, like the Saturn rings. And there were all these bands of light kind of against the ring, almost like belling up to a bar or something. They were just there. And some of them were there the whole time. Others went right by it, never stopped at it, and others were there for a short period of time and moved off in different directions. So I'm not sure what this was, but it emanated strong feeling of unconditional love. And as my this is so hard to describe, but as my vibration rose to meet it, I moved over into that direction. It was like it was pulling me in that direction, and I was able to move because the vibration I experienced was raising to meet it, and that's what the attraction was. And I bumped up against it, and there was a physical. I bumped up against it. There was something there. It wasn't just gas or something, and I understood that this was a place that I could decide. It's like I guess, an information place. And there was a question posed to me, which was, what do you want to do? Basically, you want to go back, or, you want to move on. And I immediately wanted to see more. I wanted to move on. I wanted to see it all. And with that, I began moving away from it and moving out to the other side of it. And as I looked over the it's not landscape, it's like space. As I looked far out into this area, I saw off into the distance this vast body of light, and it was pink and orange, and it was undulating, and it looked very much like it moved very much like the northern lights, only it was much larger. It just went on and on and on and on. And some of these bands of light were going into it and coming out of it. And so, look, we don't know for sure, and I'm just guessing here, but it was my strong opinion and my strong feeling that's where we go back to, that we are sort of coming from a spiritual ocean sorts, and we're like the drop of an ocean contains the whole ocean in that little drop. We are kind of like that. So we come out little drops, the spiritual ocean, and we are complete. Within us, we hold the secrets of the the spiritual ocean, right? It's all contained within us. What we go back to then is that spiritual ocean. And there's this feeling of deep interconnectedness, not to the point where you lose your own self autonomy, but almost like if you can consider it a piece of fabric, and a piece of fabric is made up of nothing more than individual threads. We are those individual threads tightly woven into a single fabric. But the thread on one end of it has just as close a connection to the thread at the opposite end of it, no matter how far the distance is, as it does to the thread that it's combined with right next to it. It's very difficult to explain, but there was such a deep sense that we all were the same thing. Even though we are different expressions of it, we are all the same thing. And it was full of love. And in seeing that, I recognized in that moment that I was in a place where I could ask for something. And what I asked for was a healing. I had improved my health a little bit, but I was still really pretty sick. So I had to ask for healing. And I immediately felt so it's almost like a little seed of heat at the very center of my heart where that stone had been, right? So that little seed of heat grew and grew, and it filled up my whole chest, and it uncomfortable. It felt like my chest was just going to burst open. And during this whole experience, I was checking in with my body. I would kind of come out of it a little bit, and I check in with my body, and I could feel I was clenching or gritting my teeth, and I would set the intention to relax. I would relax, and then I would be able to move on. And when this happened, I checked in with my body, and I was clenched up. And so as soon as I gave the intention and my body was able to relax, whatever that was in my chest shot out my head, my fingertips, and my feet, the bottom of my feet, like an electric shock. It just went. And it took with it whatever it was, whether what I required was an emotional healing. And that emotional healing was what allowed me to finally let go enough to get a physical healing. Whatever it was, that experience set in motion uh, better a better health for sure, healing. And I was just up there in that space, basking in that unconditional love, just enjoying being in the bliss body and out of my painful body. And my eyes were closed. And then something came above me very slowly. And I looked up, and it was massive. It had to have been the size of 3 or 4 football fields. And it was made of the same light. And it was this big thing of light, and it was multicolored, and certain parts of it were opaque and you couldn't see through it, but other parts were translucent and you could see into it. What I saw in those parts that you could see through, I don't know how I feel about this still, even these years later, but I'm just going to report what I saw, and that was that it looked mechanical to me. It did not look organic. It looked mechanical to me. And I I don't know what I want to say that it was, but it emanated such strong feeling, vibration of unconditional love that I felt like I had to touch it. I had to make connection with it. And I was raising up my little spirit arm and getting closer and closer. And as I went closer and closer, that rise of unconditional love came within me. And it was just, I knew that I just needed to make contact with it. And that in that connection, something would happen and I would be whole. Not whole, but it would, it's so hard, but I just needed to make connection with it. And just as I was about to make connection with it, my phone rang and it pulled me back in, and not softly. It was, I remember my arm being up, and it was like I was sucked through a vacuum tube all the way back down to the earth and back into my body, and I hit my body hard. very hard. And it was a jolt. And I was able to get myself together enough to answer the phone. And it was interesting because it was 10:30 at night. It was quite late. And my daughter never called that late. And she really didn't have a reason for calling me. And she just felt she needed to connect with me tonight before we went to bed. And I have to wonder if she picked up that I was getting just a little too far out there, and that maybe making connection with that ship would have been a sorry, I didn't want to use that word. Making connection with that object that I saw was going to be just, taking me out a little too far, and I wouldn't be able to make it back. And she sensed that. Um, and we still talk about it today. It's like so strange what drove her to call me at that late hour. But I was able to talk to her about it. And from that out of body experience on, my health began to turn a corner. And I began to improve my health enough to begin working again. And I had been on disability by that time, 25 years. And they were not going to ask me to go back to work after my long history. But the first thing I managed to do, because it was a long recovery. It took me years, really. It took me from 2016 to 2021 before I was able to actually work outside my house. So in that span of time, I got myself to where I could write and work on art. I'm an artist and a writer, and I ended up writing a children's book that was based on um, this experience that I had. It's not about a near death experience, but it was about what I learned from it. And it's a book on how to develop um, mindfulness and self love and acceptance. And it's written in the style of "Oh, the Places We Go" by Dr. Seuss. So it's meant for adults and children. Um, it's called The Heart Flame, and it was the very first really big thing I had done since getting sick. And that book, it was really interesting because that book I put out in 2019, and it took me another couple of years to be able to actually go out and work. And I ended up beginning to volunteer. I had become a yoga instructor in 2018. And one of the first things I did was I started volunteering at the cancer center that treated me as a way of giving back. And I began working with their cancer patients and their staff and their caretakers, the cancer patient caretakers. And that opened some doors for me with the Cancer Foundation. I was really lucky in the cancer treatment that I received. My oncologist, Dr. Ravi Patel, was the owner of the cancer center and the foundation, and he and his wife and their son run the foundation. And so they approached me to start breathwork and yoga classes for at-risk groups. And we first started teaching these breathwork classes at the local youth detention center for incarcerated youths. And a little bit before this, I had become a death doula, and working with people at the end of their life showed me each and every person within 4 to 6 weeks of their death, they all came away with an epiphany. And they said it in different ways, but it's all the same thing, which is all my life, I thought there was something terribly wrong with me. And it turns out nothing's wrong with me. And I had limited myself, kept myself small. I didn't do what I really wanted to do. I didn't live a big life because I had that belief about myself. And now that I'm so close to not being here, I realize I'm a beautiful being. And I had wasted all that time. And so I was looking at maybe making a difference with groups at a younger age, just starting out. And for me, it really did start in my teenage years. That's where I really did start to get into deep depression and anxiety. And from there, it just never got better. So it was an excellent opportunity for me to get in and work with youth that were at the same place and that had lots of trauma in their life. You know, the vast majority of the young men and women that come through there have horrible stories and have gone through things at their young age that I would never want to go through, would never wish on my worst enemy. But really what I saw was biggest problem was that they all bought into the story that we're told growing up, the story that's demonstrated for us growing up. And they came from long lines of people who had addiction and violence and trauma. And because that's all the parent or the caretaker could demonstrate to them, then that's where, you know, when we're children, we're like little sponges and we mimic like little parrots or what's around us so that we can fit in, so that we can be part of, to get our needs met. We learn that we have to be certain ways. And if it's a broken story you get, then that is the one you build your life on. And it becomes so ingrained in the belief of who you are that you can't see yourself as anybody else. And when you fill yourself with thoughts, words that are words of worthlessness, self-hatred, self-loathing, and it's going to create a particular type of feeling in you that's not so great. And that feeling over time will create kind of a chronic, ongoing mood and temperament. And ultimately, it kind of hardwires a personality trait into you, and it becomes the thing that you put forth in the world. So it dictates your behavior then. And that's the thing. That's what I realized is like, you know, the mind wants to go back to what it knows all the time. And if what it knows is that one story, then it true change and transformation is going to be nearly impossible. You know, because we all know at this point, we all know that, you know, we have that inner dialogue going all the time. You know, 50,000 plus automatic negative thoughts every day for all of us, that are based on whatever that story is growing up. And if you've got an inner dialogue that is all about, you know, man, if anybody really saw you, nobody would love or accept you. You're worthless. You can't do anything right. Who do you think you are? You know, you're not lovable. You're not enough. And that story, heard often enough, will begin to dictate your beliefs and your behavior. And when we go out into the world filled with these painful stories, and we behave in these ways, that we are going to get back experiences around us that validate that belief, right? You think you're worthless, you're going to go out and not care and act as if you're worthless. And then you get back an experience that somebody says, yeah, you're worthless. And then that deepens. It's just like a groove in a record player. And it's a real trick because you want to make change. I had wanted to make change forever. I was miserable. And I knew I was making everybody miserable around me. I just didn't know how to do it. I felt like I was completely locked into a black box in my head, and there were no doors and no windows, and I could not seem to just think my way out of it. I couldn't see beyond it. So all I was doing was spinning out the same thing. And that the brain also it likes to go back to what it knows, but it really doesn't like uncertainty. And when you try something new, you're going into uncertain territory. You're not going to know what's going to come around the corner. And the brain doesn't like it. And so it kicks up a lot of fear in your body, a lot of anxiety in your body. And because that's such an unpleasant experience for us physically, we kind of back away from doing new things and we go back to what we know because that's where the brain feels safest. And over time, we will mistake familiarity for security, which I believe is, I might be jumping around here a little bit, but I think that's why we grow up and we go into relationships that kind of spin out our childhood because we meet somebody and when it feels so natural and so right, we don't recognize that that could be a red flag. That if we're not in a good place, and I certainly wasn't for a long time, my dysfunction was ruling my life. And what I didn't realize is when your dysfunction is so great that is ruling your life, that what you will draw to you, somebody that matches that dysfunction. And when it feels so natural, right, it just means that their dysfunction matches yours perfectly, like a glove. And it doesn't mean that it's a good or healthy relationship, but because it's familiar, we recognize it as something safe and secure because it's what we know. It's the devil we know, right? Better the devil you know than the devil you don't know. That is exactly what that speaks to. So I had to get, and I did not like change. I did not like uncertainty. I like to know what my day to day was going to be about. But I recognized that in order to get out of that black box in my head, to get out of the cycle, the self sabotaging cycle that I had been in my whole life, I had to get real comfortable with uncertainty. And that's what I started really building mindfulness and awareness around. And I began in the moments when that fear and anxiety would kick up, I would have to take that moment, be very present, and deliberately tell my brain, almost like reprogramming my brain, no, I'm okay. We're okay. We're going forward. And whatever happens, happens. You can do this. And then telling myself, I can do this. I am capable. I am worthy of this. I am lovable. I am enough. I am smart enough. There's nothing wrong with me. I can do this. And then working through the fear and getting to the other side and realizing almost like, if you have a phobia of spiders or something, you've got to kind of face that fear. And little by little, if you do it too quickly, it's not going to work. So you got to just sort of ease yourself day to day into it, face that fear, get really comfortable with that anxiety, understand what it is, and understand that your brain and your body is not who you are. It's the vehicle that you got while you're here, like a boat or a jet. And so that anxiety is not you, it's your brain kicking out those chemicals and your body reacting to it. All you have to do is recognize that that's what it is, that you are separate from that, and that the way to get through it is to ride it out, keep telling yourself you can do it, do the work to move through it, whatever it is, show up and do the job or breathe through it or whatever it is you need to, whatever the hill is that you need to climb, keep climbing that hill to get to the other side. And the benefit of doing that is that that software then clicks in. That's the new story then. You have enough success with it that your brain is like, okay, we can do this. I see we can do this. So that belief in yourself, the confidence in yourself starts to grow. And that's how you kind of move yourself over into that direction of transforming your life into really whatever it is you want to be by recognizing that, it's not that your behavior is good or bad. Those are judgments that don't serve us. It's really that, if your behavior is not serving you, if your thoughts are not serving you, it's just evidence that you have yet to train your brain and to indoctrinate your brain with the software that is going to serve you best. You're still running off that childhood story that, listen, it kept you safe growing up. You had to get through those moments and you had to do it in a small brain, in a small child's body that didn't understand the world. So you did the best you could, but you're still operating off that very young story that's no longer serving you and is doing a whole lot of damage now. And when you separate yourself out from it that much, then you can let go of the judgment because it's really the judgment that we hold for ourselves and the world around us that get us into all that trouble, right? And if we can learn to let go of that, we can begin to allow something better and we can learn to accept and love ourselves. And in doing so, begin to build a story that serves us better for the life that we're wanting to create around us.
Christine, thank you for sharing your story. I want to unpack it a little bit and go back to the beginning.
Okay.
When you heard the voice that was telling you that your life was unfulfilled, was that a female voice or a male voice?
I get asked that often. And to this day, I could not tell you. It was it was a deep voice, not necessarily a masculine voice. It was a voice that kind of had no gender. I know that's not what people want to hear, but I couldn't honestly, I couldn't tell you male or female.
Whose voice do you think it was?
That's a really good question. Well, I've done a lot of, honestly, I don't know. I suppose if I was religious, I'm very spiritual and I was raised in a Christian unity church. So I do have that, the root. So, some people might call that that voice Jesus. So, some people may call it your spirit guide or an angel. It was a voice of a being that knew more than I knew. Definitely knew more than I knew. A very wise being.
When you were in your light body form, did you happen to see it? And if so,
My yes,
was it
I
like
was
a,
under the banded light,
were you
just
like,
like the band,
you mean like a
mhm,
ball of light, like an orb, or like a humanoid version of but pure light?
like a band rectangle.
And so,
It was band light.
and when you saw those other bands of light, would you say those were other beings?
Yes, I would. I hate to say that because I'm coming from my personal experience, and everybody that has experienced this has experienced different things. And I don't want to, I know what I believe they are, and I believe that they are bands of light, but I know this much of a whole lot of knowledge that is out there. So whether or not I'm right, I'm not sure, but that was my sense. And when I looked down at myself, I was a band of light. And I certainly did, even though I didn't interact with them necessarily, I certainly did connect with them as other light beings.
During your out of body experience while you were meditating, you also had a question posed to you. Was that the
Mm.
same source that was during your NDE?
It didn't feel like the same source. That that actually felt more like it wasn't a gatekeeper because a lot of the bands of light were passing this thing completely. So it wasn't like they had to go to this and then before they could move on, but it felt very much like it was an information station. Like they were coming up, they could decide based based on their experience with this thing where they wanted to go, and it was more of a feeling than a voice. It was like a question was presented to me, um, but I don't really recall that there was a voice attached to it. It was just an idea that was in my brain. I mean, didn't have a brain at the time, but it was within me. The question was posed, and I immediately wanted to go on and see more. So
Um,
that would be my best guess. And maybe the description of an information station isn't great. I mean, maybe somebody else has experienced something similar to this, um, that can shed a little bit more light on it. But that's really what it felt like to me.
the grid that you saw, was it covering the entire earth?
Um, you mean as I was going away from it?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't say everything that I saw happening to the earth as I was moving away. You see it from a distance. So it's the globe with the little oxygen bubble around it. You can see all the land regions and the clouds and the oceans. But as I was moving away, it was like bright green leaves started to sprout all over the land regions. And those leaves grew into roots and trees, small trees that grew together. And eventually they grew together to form four main trunks that came out of the earth. And then they grew together and formed one giant tree with the roots into the earth. And that tree then began to sprout those little green leaves all over it and little golden blossoms. And from the golden blossoms, the blossoms started emitting this very glittery golden pollen that sort of haloed the tree. And in as the roots were growing into the earth, it was turning the earth over. It was pulling things out of the earth like a lot of trauma, like past wars. And I was seeing a lot of the history of Earth. And some of it was less traumatic, but a lot of it was about wars and turning the soil over and over and over. And I still don't know what that was about. Um, but it did form, it was interesting in that the earth, the globe of the earth below, the twisted tree trunk, and the globe of the pollen in the tree above did form an infinity sign. And in that moment that I recognized that what I was looking at was the infinity sign, there was the idea in my brain that this represented, that what I was looking at was representing our never-ending connection to the earth, between the earth and the spiritual world, right?
To me, what you've been describing is something organic. It's trees and leaves and stuff. But earlier you mentioned a grid system that was mechanical.
Oh, that. Yeah, that didn't have to do with the earth. That was at the very end after I had felt like I had received that healing and I was just basking in that bliss body. And it came above me and it was not a grid. It looked, like I said, it looked mechanical to me. And I don't want to get too far out there, but it looked like a ship. Might as well say it. It looked like a ship. And I don't know why I have such a problem with that, but part of my brain just does not want to accept that. So I never saw anybody, like any beings or anything in the ship. It was just, coming over me. And the part that I was able to see into the ship, it looked like some sort of an engine uh, in it. Not an engine that I've seen here, but it moved very much like an engine.
Hmm. Interesting.
That this part of it, um, I do have a little problem with. And actually, for years after that out of body experience, even though the whole experience was so fantastic, this part of it just did not settle well with me because of the implications, I guess. And I thought, for a long time, I thought, well, maybe I had just hallucinated all of that. Maybe I was just really tired and it didn't happen. And maybe, you know, maybe I was just delusional. Um, and then some years later, but it wasn't that. Like I've had like dreams and I've had, well, not delusions or hallucinations, but I've had experiences that were not real and it was nothing like this. This was so much more real than anything that, just like the near death experience, the out of body experience that I experienced was very similar in that makes this existence feel like a dream. Like I don't have the clarity when I'm here in my body that I had when I was out there. And I mean, I can still get into those expanded states, but it's just different. It's just not, it was not a hallucination. And the way I know that is because years later, I was watching a show called Unsolved Mysteries, and they had a little segment on there where they would show, it's if for people that don't know, they show videos, and then there's people hosts that talk about what they think the video is, and they can be paranormal or they can be just like unexplained events. And this video, and a lot of them are from home recorders, and so you've got to kind of take that with a grain of salt. This one particular video was from the NASA space station, and it was a camera outside the space station, and in the distance in space, it showed this thing, and it was the same thing I saw. I would love to know when this video was taken and if it was close to the time that I had my experience, because it was this giant, long, and it was rounded on the ends, but it was long. And like I said, it was 3 or 4 football fields in size. and it was multicolored, and you could see even at that distance, some of it was translucent and other parts were opaque, and it was made of the same light that I had seen. And it was sped up. They said when they speed up the recording, that over time the thing sort of curls and then disappears, and they have no explanation for it. But it was exactly what I saw, and from that moment on, I knew it was, like, no, I did have that experience. That is exactly what I saw. So that confirmed for me um, the piece of it that I was struggling with most. I still don't know what it was. And I'm open to, I'm not going to say that it's something for sure because I don't know. But it is, it looked mechanical to me when I was that close to it.
And that was a source of unconditional love.
Yes, everything was emanating unconditional love. And the things that emanated unconditional love most intensely was that big ocean that I saw at a distance, but that was some distance away. And the ship, the thing over me was right above me. And because I was so close in proximity to it, it really peaked and it really ramped up that energy and that vibration in me. And that's what made me want to connect with it.
That's fascinating. It's a great mystery.
It is a great mystery. It's a great mystery. And I'm okay leaving it a mystery. It was a beautiful experience. It was absolutely life transforming. And I've had many little experiences along the way since then that have just validated that I am on the path that I'm meant to be on. Like it was very clear to me with what they said to me in the tunnel that I need to go back and do the work to fill up that landscape. That what it was talking about, the bit in the Bible that talks about the work we do here are the treasures we lay in heaven. I think that was the message for me, that I had laid no treasures for myself so far because I had done none of the work that I was meant to do here. And that what I needed to do was basically get to work. And I meditate every day, but I also pray, even though I'm not real religious, I pray every day. And my prayer first is thank you. And second, it is let me know I'm on the path I'm meant to be on. I'm making the way easy and available to me and enjoyable along the way. And it certainly has worked out that way. And I'm very clear that when I am doing well, certain things are easier for me. And when I'm not on my path, that's why we have the pain, right? To let us know we're straying from our path. We're straying from the light that shines the way for us. And it's different for everybody. What we're here to work on is different for everybody. And we're all at different places, right? But everything, just like going back to the analogy of the spiritual ocean and how, as little drops of the ocean contains the whole ocean, we, as these little drops of the spiritual ocean, we're fully contained. We have absolutely everything we need within us. And if we have the ability to know how to tap into it, which is through self-love, actually, and learning the art of allowing, then we can change the experience that we have here. We spoke a little earlier about there's always going to be pain, just in everybody's life. Everybody has a certain amount of pain, just being human beings. Um, but it's the judgment of that pain, the judgment, the circumstances, or the judgment of our experiences of that pain that really holds suffering. And I think being able to understand that connection and then work towards building enough awareness and mindfulness that you catch yourself in the moments of being judgmental of yourself and of others, and being able to understanding how that is the nugget there that's really destroying and making you suffer, and learning how to let go of that, and instead embracing a kinder, more compassionate, more open and loving frame of mind. That the suffering, that the judgment is creating the hell on earth, and the building of inner self-love, kindness, and compassion for all is what develops the heaven on earth. And that's what I realized. I don't think it's that we're laying treasures in heaven and that's a place that exists beyond us. I mean, maybe it is. Maybe it is another place. I saw that landscape, and that could be, one of millions of things out there that we have yet to discover. But I do know personally that I spent my entire life building my own personal hell on earth. And when I learned how to truly let go and love myself and embrace and accept who I was, and then work to bring something good into the world, something that gives my life purpose and meaning in a positive way, helps others. That was my road to creating my own heaven on earth. And I am, it's a balance, right? Sometimes, some days I'm still stuck. I can still get caught up. It's not like you reach a level and boom, you're good. You know, life has all kinds of things coming at you in all kinds of ways. And I still get tangled up and I still get kind of drugged down that reactionary rabbit hole. But I catch myself much, much more quickly. I don't allow myself to ruminate and to build it up into this great big storm within me. And by allowing myself to be at peace within, I allow the chaos to happen around me rather than within me. And that helps me build my own, keep my focus on what my work, my purpose really is, allow the world, the chaos to take care of itself. Just get up and do my best every day. And that has led me to creating my own personal heaven on earth. And I just, from that experience on, I have never had another thought of not wanting to be here. I am, listen, when it's my time to go, I'm happy to go, but I am not looking to shorten my time here. What I'm looking to do now, because I know the way it works, is as much good in the world as I can do. And that good starts by doing good for myself, right? And because here's what I really did learn about, especially about love, but it's really about everything you want to experience. You cannot expect somebody to come into your life and love you and accept you and respect you and do all of these, offer all of these things to you if you are unable or unwilling to provide that for yourself. And I didn't understand, the saying, you can't love another until you love yourself is really true, but I really did not understand what that meant. And what it means is if you have so much self loathing and self hatred in yourself that you cannot physically allow yourself to generate feelings of self love, it is simply an empty cup. You have nothing to give. And the way that you are able to have all of this love. Now I have all of this love to give to those around me, and it never runs out. It used to run out all the time, right? Now it never runs out. And it's because I know how to fill myself up with it. And that's where I take it from to give to other people, right? I send it directly from my heart to other people. And it's the same thing with respect, right? You're unable or unwilling to respect yourself. It's hard to have somebody come in and respect you. I mean, think about it. It's hard to respect somebody that doesn't respect themselves or their things, and, it's not taking care of themselves. So if I want, and that I think is what the meaning behind become the change you want to see. But why real change is so elusive when all you're changing is your behavior. You've got to really change what drives the behavior first. And that's the feeling, and that's the attitudes, that's the beliefs. And all of that comes from the thoughts that we dwell on, all of it. And all those thoughts come from that story that we were sold on, that we believe, that we continue to invest in. Yeah. And once I realized that that is really how it works, and the key is, and I'm saying, I'm going to say it simply, but it is not a simple thing to do. I was very resentful I had all kinds of resentments towards people, and I used to feed and fuel my resentments by ruminating and getting myself really angry and all worked up again over it. And I would feel righteous and justified in my anger, right? And that was the thing that I held on to because they had wronged me. I was doing nothing wrong, right? So I'm really angry about it. And that righteous anger is very difficult to give up. That sense of injustice. But once I was able to do that, physically, I began to get better. I didn't realize how that was so connected to my own physical well being. It's like, we have a physical body, emotional body, a spiritual body, a mental body, right? We have all these different bodies, but they're all one. They're not separate bodies doing their own thing. They all interact with each other. And if you think about, if you feel physically unwell, it's hard to feel emotionally or mentally well. You feel mentally unwell, it's hard to feel physically or emotionally well. Same thing with emotions. So you really do have to address change from the root cause. And the big driving force behind everything is that chronic emotional state that we carry with us at all times, right? And we invest in that with the thoughts that we think on. And good things happen and we'll get happy, but then eventually we come down to wherever that chronic emotional line is, which is made up of the thoughts we ruminate on and the beliefs that we hold about ourselves and the world around us. So in order to, and this chronic emotional state of being that we all have is different for all of us, will absolutely dictate the life that we go on to have. Relationships, our views on the world, opportunities that come our way, our success in our careers, our success in our relationships or failures. It all stems and is built on this chronic emotional state of being. But if you want a better experience, the best way to do that is to work at getting a better story, letting go of all of your resentments. So forgiveness of yourself as well. You cannot forgive others and hold on to resentment towards yourself or hard feelings towards yourself. And we don't realize it really does shackle us into that pattern of behavior. And so we have to let that go, open ourselves up to a better story and believing a better story, and allow that emotional state of being to rise. And as it rises, everything changes because we're meeting what we get back from our experience in the world is a mirror reflection of what is happening within us at all times. And so we have to start creating that change within. And then when we go out into the world, that radiates out from within us and it will alter the experiences then we get back.
After watching this podcast, people may want to reach out to you and ask you questions. Are you open to that?
Sure.
What's the best way to contact you?
I have an email address. I mean, would you recommend that I just give you my email address?
It's you're giving it to the world. If you want to give that, or a Facebook profile, or an Instagram profile, there's many ways for people to contact you.
Right. I do have Facebook. It's, I believe it's Christine McBride 1 that shows you how long I've been on Facebook. And if that's not right, if the little icon with the little picture is of me doing a yoga stand, so I'm doing kind of like a handstand in a curled position up on my elbows on the beach. So if you see that little icon, that is the appropriate icon for me. And I'll go ahead and give you my email address. It's christinemcbrideart@gmail.com.
You have your art and you have the children's book. Is there anything else out there that you would like people to know about?
Yeah, that I'm also a yoga instructor and Reiki practitioner. And the program that we developed is these breathwork classes. Actually, I created a whole mindfulness program around it that includes mindfulness, breathwork, I am affirmations, visualizations, and art therapy. And the nonprofit that I work, I'm the head of education and a teaching administrator. Um, and it's MFI, and that stands for Mindful Futures Initiative. And we work with at-risk groups of people.
Well, before we wrap it up, can you give us one more positive message?
I would say that that it's never too late. I think that that's what I've learned. I didn't figure this out until I was in my mid 50s. And I wrote my first book at 55. And I am 60, and I am now working for a nonprofit doing something that brings a lot of purpose to my life. And I love that. I love the kids. I love all my teachers that I manage. And I love the people I work with. And I just could not be happier now. And no matter how full of despair and hopelessness you might be, that there is hope, and that you don't have to keep yourself tethered to those lower emotions. And that if you can just find something within you redeemable and worth investing in, no matter where you are, no matter how bad it is right now, start where you are, accept where you are, start where you are, and just keep pushing forward. No, there's a Winston Churchill quote that I love that served me well. And it's, if you're going through hell, keep going. And that has served me well when I am in it. When I'm in hell, just don't set up camp. Don't give up. Just keep moving forward. You'll get there. And that it's also about the art of allowing. We're really so caught up with trying to do things. And so much of this is just about learning how to surrender and let go and allow. Because our natural state of being is this elevated state of being. We're keeping ourselves trapped in these lower emotions that don't serve us.
Christine, thank you for your message, and thank you for being my guest.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I really did appreciate the invitation, and I enjoyed my time here.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.